Okay, so I think we're going to get started. I know there's a lot of you out there, and I'm Nanette Macy-Junes, the executive director at the museum. And though I can't see you, I know most of you because you're the wonderful membership of the Columbus Museum of Art who support so much of what we do. I want to welcome you to the virtual opening of Raggin, the art of Brenda Lynn Robinson's House and Journals, which is the centerpiece exhibition of our year. We are running this exhibition long, so we all will be able to see it at different times of the year, and maybe more than once, I'm hoping. So it'll be open until next fall. It takes over the entire ground floor of the Walter Ring. I am here with the two curators of the exhibition, Carol Ginshaft, who is our curator at large, and Deidre Hamler, who is co-curator of the exhibition, who's been working with us. Actually, she worked with us many years ago and has been coming back now to work with us in 2018. Deidre is wearing the mask. We have two wonderful masks, Amina Robinson masks we've had made, and she's showing, and Carol's holding up her one in the bag. There's also a beautiful yellow one, and I am wearing the Amina Robinson scarf, which is made out of a blended fabric, but there's silk ones coming in as well. They're beautifully red. They are actually, the work of art is the work of art you're looking at on the screen right now. So these are exclusive for the Columbus Museum of Art. They make great holiday gifts. So I wanted you to know that. So let me see. Amina Robinson passed away in 2015. We had a very long relationship with Amina. I don't remember knowing the museum and not knowing Amina Robinson. That's how long. Her time with the museum actually predates my time at the museum. When she first walked through our doors, she was in high school. When she passed, she left the museum most of her estate. We represent her estate, which was the house, which of course, as we all know, has been, many of you probably know, has been renovated and is going to be an artist fellowships live workspace that will start next summer, that we're working on this with GCAC. So we're very excited about that. But all of the work still in her estate, everything from completed works of art to her journals to just everything. I mean, it is an awesome responsibility, and we at the museum take this very, very seriously. People often ask me, they said, did she tell you, surely she left you instructions? And I said, yes, the instruction she left me when I asked was, you'll do the right thing, Nanette. I know the museum will do the right thing. So we are committed to doing the right thing. So I want you to know that. This exhibition is incredible. It is going to reveal the secrets of the house, all the things that we found. It took us literally most of the last 5 years to sort through everything that was in the house. I always tell people at my house, a stack is just stuff. A stack of Amina's of material could be suffused with meaning. So we were very, very careful as we sorted through everything, made an inventory, recorded, photographed. The two women on this, you're going to get to know this evening, are the two women who have, this has been a labor of love and professional devotion of both of them. Carol has worked on Amina for many, many decades. And we have known, actually, I've known Deidre for at least 2 decades. She worked with us as a multicultural educator and curator early on, and then has now come back to us as the co-curator of the Amina Robinson exhibition. Both of them have incredible credentials. It's a very long thing. I told them I wasn't going to read it because otherwise you really want to hear them. I want you to stay on the whole hour if you can, because at the end we have an incredibly special treat for you, and that is Scott Woods. We invited Scott Woods to write a piece for us, a poem for us about Amina, and this commissioned piece will be debuted this evening. If you don't know Scott Woods, boy, you should. He is an Emmy Award-winning writer. He is the founder of, I want to make sure I say it right, Streetlight Guild. And he was the last year's award, is it this year or last year, Scott? The 2017 winner of the Greater Columbus Arts Council's Columbus Makes Art Excellence Award. So he is an extraordinary talent in our community. We're honored that he's going to read and debut that poem this evening. I will now be quiet and let all of you take over, because I am as eager as everyone else is to hear what our two incredible curators have to tell us and share this evening.
Well, just responding to Nanette's introduction, I always laugh because I think Amina Robinson knew exactly what she was doing when she left her estate to the Columbus Museum of Art. I think she's smiling and kind of laughing, but I'm not sure the Columbus Museum of Art knew what we were getting. So I just had to put that in. But it's been such a privilege to work on this project, especially during this intense period of COVID, where we've been able to go ahead and do all these things with the book and the house and the exhibition. So I'm really very grateful for that. Before I get into the exhibition, I just have to give a shout out to the fabulous team who helped put this together. And I'm just going to name their names because, the museum has had some setbacks lately where we had to reduce staff, and yet these people have really devoted their skills and their talents to making this exhibition happen. So I have to say thanks to our exhibition designer, Greg Jones, and his crew, David Holm, Cameron Sharp, Patrick O'Rourke, Andy Meyer, and then to our registrars, Nicole Romy and Elizabeth Hopkin, and then to our team from the visitor engagement side and our tech people who have just done a fabulous job of bringing videos and music to really enhance and support the exhibition. And that's Nick Fields and Hannah Mason Macklin and Jeff Sims. So a big shout out to all of them, because we could have never done this without them. So I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about Amina because I know so many of you know about her, but I'm just going to like a few tidbits. Of course, she was born here in Columbus in 1940. And she said from the time she was 3, she wanted to be an artist. And, I think she was really born into the best possible family she could have been, because she learned all kinds of handed down art kind of strategies from her parents. Her father taught her to draw, to make paper, to make books. Her mother taught her all kinds of sewing and needlecraft kinds of things. And that she combined with her training from CCAD, it was Columbus Art School at the time. And she just created this, her own artistic vocabulary. To my way of thinking, her art, and there's a lot of it, is really about connections. She tends, all of her work, she tries to connect the past with the present and the future and her work is grounded in the idea of Sankofa, which is an African concept that we really can't exist in the present or know where we're going without understanding, not only just knowing the past, but understanding it. She also made connections between ancestors and their descendants, between Africa and the African diaspora, especially African Americans, and especially here in Columbus. And then I think what's most important is that she connected the earthly, the materialistic, with the sacred and the spiritual. And I hope that all of you will get to spend some time in the exhibition and read some of her journals, because you'll see what a very sacred and spiritual person she was. So Raggin presents more than 6 decades of Amina Robinson's art, bookend by never before seen very early work and very late work, and a lot in between as well. And we hope that you will be encouraged to actively experience the artist's home and creative processes, and better understand her intention to bear witness through celebrating, as she said, the everyday lives and culture of Black people and their endurance through centuries of injustice. Her work is at once a celebration of African American culture and history, but it is also a cautionary tale in which she hopes her art can play a part in ensuring that the wrongs of the past are not repeated. Deidre, we're going to move to the next slide.
Thank you, Carol.
You're on mute.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. we have to tell you that this is not a retrospective. Because if we were to show all the work that Amina has done in her lifetime, it would take over the entire museum and a few other buildings in the neighborhood. So this particular exhibition focuses on her home studio, and what we found when we discovered work within the studio that had never been seen. Also, some of the materials that she used, the research that she did, the art and journals, especially the journals. There were more than 150 of them that were discovered in the house. And all of these pieces we feel that we're showing in this exhibition profoundly illuminate her life's purpose. It's an examination of never before seen work, as Carol said, and it encompasses a distinguishing display of various materials, numerous techniques, subject matter, and even a variety of emotions that will be elicited through the exhibition. The exhibition is also comprised of furnishings that she collected. She went to antique stores and found things probably on the street that she found and made into her own. You will see those. She had numerous books. I think everyone that walked into her home was impressed by her library. So we will have a display of of many of her books. She had a collection of buttons, fabrics, canes, beads, and beautiful thimbles and art she traded with other artists. And there will be a huge, actually 2 photo enlargements of her home. Different rooms in her home. One is her living room where she spent most of her time, and the other is part of her studio. We hope that the exhibition and the catalog actually provide visitors with a view into the spiritual, as Carol said, and give you the same sense of awe and inspiration and magic that we found when we went through the excavation of her home, if you will, or the discoveries of the treasures we found in her home. And we hope that by showing these pieces to you, that you will be inspired as we were with the sacredness of her space. So in the beginnings, Amina lived the first 17 years of her life on Columbus's east side at Poindexter Village. Some of the work, of course, as you heard, was influenced by her parents, the wonderful example of the artistry of her parents. But she was also influenced by her family members. Some of her early work was of her sisters and her cousins and her family members and her nieces and nephews. And she was positively influenced by a nurturing community of Poindexter Village. As you see in this image here, Beatty Center is one of those places where she would learn art and eventually teach art. And the images here that you see of Sunday afternoon art lessons with Uncle Alvin. Uncle Alvin was a formidable person in Amina's life, who you will see throughout the exhibition, influenced much of her writing, much of her storytelling, and much of her artwork. She also was positively influenced by many educators and art teachers that poured love into her throughout her career. Her early career started, there's artwork of her that she created when she was as young as 8 years old. And then of course, work that went throughout her young life into her 70s. Next slide, please. Carol.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay. So as you see in the beginning, she did a lot of work that the one image you see here, the beginnings work, that is from Beatty Recreation Center, where she was proud to win an award early in her life, a Blue Ribbon Premier Award. The self-portrait done when she was 19 years old features a rabbit coming out of her head. That was her pet rabbit. That we think this is a striking piece that kind of illuminates the quality of surrealism that she embodied at that age. And then the figure to the right is her adored son, Sidney, who was born in 1967. She was married to Leroy Robinson, a serviceman, and bore beautiful Sydney, that she poured her life into Sydney. And there are pieces in the show of her early work that really reflect upon the love that she had for her son. Okay, Carol.
So in this section, as there are 5 monitors throughout the exhibition that feature 11 of Amina's journals. And these are the 2 journals that are in the beginning section. And the one on the left is a journal that Amina kept when she participated in the March on Washington in 1963. This was a really pivotal event for her. She had been very active in the Congress of Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She made posters, she protested, but she boarded a bus for Washington. It was the first time she left Columbus and left her home. And she went with a friend, Barbara Jemison. They spent all day on the bus singing songs. And when she arrived, it was very hot. And at some point during the day, she actually fainted and was ushered to the restroom. And after that, she was directed, she and her friend, to the area where dignitaries sat. And for the next 2 to 3 hours, she actually got to converse with people like James and David Baldwin and Harry Belafonte. And it was an amazing moment. And even, we have in the exhibition, she became part of a centerfold of Ebony magazine that was chronicling the March on Washington. But again, I'm going to read you just a couple sentences from this letter that we have both in the monitor that you can see, but we have the actual letter in a case in this room. She says, "We sang songs, many songs, and then more songs. All the way up and all the way back, we sang freedom songs. This is a beginning and has taken on the feeling of something deeply religious. It has awakened and aroused the conscience of the nation." And to read her words is really, especially in light of the protests this summer and the George Floyd protests, some of the things she writes could have been written today. She talks about she was so hopeful on this trip. She really thought that this was going to make a big change, which it did. It certainly did. But she also knew that it's not going to be one event that wipes out racism, that it's a struggle and that it's going to take a long time. So this is a meaningful journal that you can see in this part of the exhibition. The other one on the right is Uncle Alvin's story. So Uncle Alvin was very important in Amina's life. It was her mother's oldest brother, and he was a storyteller, and he loved spinning yarns, and Amina loved listening. And this particular part of the journal about Uncle Alvin, I love for several reasons. Evidently, Uncle Alvin was going to the Army the next day, and he came to visit at the Robinson apartment, and you see him holding the 3 little girls. One was just an infant. Amina was 3 years old, and her older sister was 5. But what I love about this is that you see there is a button tablecloth. So Amina's mother taught her to sew buttons onto cloth, and then they would use them as tablecloths or as armchair coverings. And of course, buttons became very important to Amina, and you will see that in the next section of the exhibition too. So she did lots of work. Buttons became very special because she believed that they represented the souls who had worn the clothes where those buttons came from. I think we're ready for the next one. And so then the next section of the exhibition is called Material Matters. And this is a close-up of Amina's workspace in her new sanctuary studio that she had added to her house after she won the MacArthur, and she used the cash prize to build this studio, which she kept very private. Very few people came back there. But you can see her inks and her pens and her brushes and lots of buttons, which were as I said, an important part of her work. So this section of the exhibition really just revolves around her use of every conceivable material that you can think of. I like to think that she viewed the whole world as a big art supply store, because she used things that other people threw away. She used things that were recycled. She made books out of all kinds of homemade paper. And you can see here she used cloth and buttons and found objects to make animals and dolls and books. These dolls, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have music boxes in them. She loved music boxes and the music from them. And so they are embedded in these dolls. And some of the dolls actually become books, as you can see, the second from the right. In front of the dolls are books, and these are her button beaded books, which I think are a really wonderful kind of art statement that is truly Amina. They're beautifully encrusted books with buttons and beads and found objects, but they have blank pages, blank cloth pages. And her idea was that the people who received these would create their own stories using their imaginations, and that they would think great thoughts looking at these wonderful books. There are lots of other kinds of materials in this section. She made an art of, she liked to collect paper bags and paper boxes and then just do beautiful drawings on them. So when she traveled, she would collect little paper bags and then do drawings inside as well. She loved, she had actually a collection of doors, solid core wooden doors that she would carve and paint. And we have 2 of those in the exhibition. She really believed that doors were kind of the entree to another world. And so those were important to her. And then we have a wall of her prints, which she was a printmaker. She loved doing lithographs and etchings, but her favorite form were woodcuts. And she loved just gouging out the wood and creating these wonderful wood prints. Deidre?
Thank you. So another section of the exhibition is called Street Cries. And this section explores Amina's interpretation of 3 different views of street cries. The first, the agonizing cry of people in poverty. To her chagrin, Amina, when she became a single parent after separating from her husband, had to go on welfare. And she was able to notice firsthand what it felt like and what it was like to stand in lines to seek assistance from the county or the city or the state. And she really did document and show the pain and the suffering of what the people what poverty did to people, and what having to ask for help had to do with the similar feeling of being incarcerated, in a sense, by the system. The second level of street cries has to do with the criers on the street that she witnessed on Mount Vernon Avenue, Long Street, and in Poindexter Village. The people who were crying out, the peddlers who were crying for people to come and buy their wares. Those were, the chicken foot man and the brownie skin man and the sock man, and the people that she witnessed really as early traders who came to the streets with a message of entrepreneurship, if you will. And then a third level that's depicted in the image on the bottom was the collective cry of people for protest, for liberation, seeking liberation and freedom from oppression or biased treatment or prejudice. And this piece on the bottom really does kind of exemplify her passion for looking for equity in systems and looking in and depicting what the disparities that were out there, and she understood the power of people to come together and elevate their voices. And this particular protest piece, Carol and I really recognized this was from an issue from the 1940s that was relevant on Long Street with the Lincoln Theater protest, but it's very relevant today, even 60 years later.
Yeah, and just to point out that the Lincoln Theater was not segregated. They welcomed Black clients, but the same people who managed the Lincoln managed other theaters in the city of Columbus that were segregated and didn't allow African Americans. So that's what these people are protesting.
The Vanguard
I just
League.
wanted to make sure we knew that the Lincoln Theater was not
Mhm.
segregated. So kind of the heart of the exhibition, I think, is in this section called Ancestral Voices from Bondage to Freedom. These two examples really do demonstrate that title, because towards later in life, of course, after President Obama was elected, she did a whole series called Presidential Suite. And clearly it was a celebration of freedom. And you see that in the upper painting of the president, Michelle Obama, her mother, and their two daughters, and their dog, the first dog, Bo, walking through the rose garden. Amina was just elated at, of course, the election of President Obama. But instead of just talking about that, she did a lot of research, as she did for all the series of work that she created. And she found out, of course, that President Obama had that his family was from Kenya, that he spent his boyhood in Indonesia with his mother. And so part of the series really dealt with those aspects. But what you see in the piece that is at the bottom is Wing for Our Ancestors. And this is honoring those slaves who helped build the Capitol and also the White House. It's so interesting that at the time when she did this, people weren't really aware of that. It wasn't until 2012 that there was a plaque put at the Capitol and at the White House that acknowledged the fact that slaves had helped build it. So Amina really believed that she wanted to honor those people because they had contributed to building these remarkable edifices that really became a symbol of democracy, and how important those people were in doing that. One of the scholars in the essay in the catalog says that her intent was to make the invisible visible, and I think that's what she's doing here. And another later series of work, actually this is the cover of the catalog and kind of the image we've been using a lot, are about her great aunt. And this is a story, it's kind of a mythic story that Amina put together based on the stories of her great aunt Cornelia, who was also known as Big Annie. She lived here in Columbus on Hosek Street, and this was her father's side of the family. And her dad would take her over to talk with her great aunt several times a week. And Amina loved listening to her stories because she told about the ancestral stories of how the family began in Africa and were kidnapped and enslaved. And Amina kind of combined those stories with what she had studied and researched. And she did this series and many pieces about Africa and about the Middle Passage and about enslavement in America, emancipation, and migration north. All of these pieces, which she called Themba, a life of grace and hope. Themba was the African name she gave to her great aunt. All of them, like the one you see on top, which is called Incantations, have African masks, African fabric, but then it's almost like a frame. There's like 4 pieces of heavy paper that she sewed together with buttons. And by the final picture section on the right, you can see that the woman is wearing kind of a house dress, or very American looking kind of clothes. And she, I think the discussion is, some of us think she's singing in praise, and some think she's perhaps more enraged. But it's really up to the viewer to decide. And it's really translated as Amina's passion, I think. The one on the below it is called Life in the Big Boat. And again, it's quite eerie. It alludes to the fact of these Africans being packed, so tightly in the hulls of ships coming across to the Americas, that horrible, terrible journey. And here again, you see that the figure in the center has a mask. So in each of these pieces, and there are in the exhibition probably 6 or 7 of them, all kind of horizontal, but they all have references to African masks, Africa before slavery, and the fact that Amina was very proud of her African ancestry. And I think today we take that for granted, but when she was, in the 60s and 70s, that was not the case. And she early on made these connections with Africa and actually went to Africa in 1979. She said she had to go all the way to Africa to find Poindexter Village, where she grew up here in Columbus. So she was very proud of that heritage, and it, I think, enhances it's present in much of her work, and especially this series. You can see that from her journal, she wrote this quote you can read: "For 61 years, I have given my life to celebrating African people throughout the world. But in celebrating people, I also disclose the racial and discriminatory practices that have haunted Black people to this day. Not far have we come. The injustices, even today as I pen this memoir," this was around 2006, "are still present in our daily life." And we actually repeat this quote on a nearby wall with some questions for visitors to just ponder, to ask them if they think we've come any further since, in the last 10 or 15 years, or even longer than that. And how can we, each of us, contribute to finding equity for all people and true freedom? So I think this is a very thoughtful section. It also has her an homage to her father called Dad's Journey, which is a raganon. And a raganon is this huge tapestry that it's encrusted with beads and buttons and music boxes. And here again, it's about her dad, but it's also about those Africans who, came to the Americas, were forced into slavery, and the whole story really of African Americans to this day. So that's a real highlight of that section of the exhibition.
So here we come to a space. And as I was listening to Carol talk, I was thinking of Amina sitting down and writing the memoir, the piece of the memoir, asking the questions, penning her poems. And I wondered, I think about it even now, where was she sitting? What was she doing? What inspired that thought? And that's what this exhibition is really about. It's about us kind of going into the mind of this artist, going into the rooms of this house, this home studio, and sort of putting ourselves in her position. Well, this room is quite special. It's the writing room, and it is on the upper level at the top of the stairs to the right of her home studio. When you walk into this room, you know that something special happened here. I just imagine that she might have been pinning that statement that Carol just read, sitting at the desk right here where it's Uncle Alvin's Stories is written there, and it says a memoir. And she used this room as a sacred space to house the most important papers to her, to listen to music that inspired her, to look around at art that was traded by other artists and by the ancestors of her family on pictures on the walls, and to look at this small space and to know how much happened in this room is just quite inspiring. She made this little room for herself, and she did not really invite too many people in. To our knowledge, this was a very sacred and special place. And this room has been replicated in the galleries at the museum for this exhibition. We just thought it was special enough that we wanted you to have the same kind of bird's eye view that we had when we open the door, and you feel really kind of like you're invading, but you're just really in a very special place. This is where she held her special writing instruments, like I said, her family photos, and she sat at that desk, and her mind must have wandered to all the places that we are now going to show you in the exhibition. In the exhibition, in the writing area, it's called Art Plus Writing. What she says is that you don't separate the art and the writing, and that is very true. As you look in her journals, that you
Mm. Got muted.
sorry about that. You will not only get to see her actual journals, but you'll be able to through the technology actually read through some of the pages, and to understand that she really understood it was so connected. The art was not separate from the writing, and the writing was not separate from the art. Yes, she incorporates the writing in much of her artwork, but also she incorporates art into much of her writing. So they were so inseparable. Also, the Art Plus Writing has in it a wonderful connection piece, as Carol described a bit earlier, which is giving you an opportunity to answer questions, but also there is on one of the walls a beautiful poem that she wrote, and it's and also an image of people that she held dear. And Amina would steam open envelopes. And you may have seen these before, but she steamed open envelopes, and she would create art on envelopes. And in this particular section, she honors a couple of people that she really respected in the community. And one of the connectors is asking you to also think about, who would you write a letter to? Who would you, if you could, who would you try to honor with a letter to recognize their greatness in your life? And then finally, in this section, there is an homage to music. The writing room will have a phonograph. Well, there is a phonograph player in the room, and you can see it there. It looks like a radio, but it's actually an LP player. And there will be music playing. And this music is actually, there are actually selections of music from her actual collection of music. She loved classical, jazz, R&B music. And so there will be a collection of music playing that you can hear only in this space.
And I might say that I think we've been very clever in our IT people. You know, with COVID, we often do activities in the galleries that people would perhaps touch a monitor, touch a screen, but everything in the exhibition is touchless, and it's on loops. So you don't have to worry about touching anything, but you can take advantage either of, you know, looking through these journals that just kind of are on this loop, or by using your cell phone to interact with the activity that Deidre just mentioned. The next to the last section of the exhibition is called Raggin' On, and it brings together 3 themes that we found were important to Amina in the work that we found in the house. But as I was joking before, we could have had 10 of these because there are a lot of themes. But a very important one is that Amina really exalted women. She really believed that women were the ones that kept families together during slavery, and that often women ended up being single moms taking care of their families as well. So here she says, as you see, that we come standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. We come, the women, the daughters, the wives, the healers, the midwives, the scribes, the artists, the poets, laborers and domestics, priestesses, shamans, warrior and women goddesses, we come. And Amina did many, many drawings and paintings and sculptures about women. The one on the left is called Field Hands of an Artist. And her point here, and she kind of talks about this, is that these women who had to endure life as slaves and, take, work and then also take care of their families, they also somehow found the time to make beautiful objects, be it quilts or baskets or um, other kinds of textiles. And so she's kind of honoring them in this piece. And then the other one is called Folk Costumes. And to be honest, it was one of these wonderful little discoveries we made. It was tucked away in a little box. And this is one of about 6 different designs that she called costume designs. Now, Amina had this idea of a symphonic poem. That was, in fact, the name of our last retrospective exhibition. And the idea was that arts come together, that her visual art and her writing, and she made puppets, and she had this idea of a really huge production, and she talked about that a lot. And perhaps these costumes were for something like that. I wish she were around to ask, but they're really quite beautiful. And a lot of them are in black and white fabrics, very striking.
Mhm.
The next section in this Raggin area is about her travel. So Amina loved to be at home, and she writes often about the solitude she required in which to work. And people that knew her well knew that there were periods of time when she wouldn't answer the door or the phone. So she really relished being alone at home and working. However, she loved to travel as well. So the work, which she would call a rag painting on the left, she did after her trip to Israel in 1998. She came back. She was so inspired by being there for 5 weeks that the next year she really just worked to make this art. There were prints, there were drawings, and there were watercolors, and there was a whole series of these rag paintings that are, again, very beautiful. She loved the fact that there were so many different cultures represented in Israel, and so many different people somewhat working together in a peaceful way. So she spent a lot of time looking at these faces, sketching them, and then coming back and doing these bigger rag paintings. And then in 2006, she went to Italy. She had always wanted to go to Italy, especially to Vinci. She was an ardent admirer of Leonardo da Vinci. In fact, I always joke that, she used to say that she had a boyfriend and his name was Leonardo, and everybody would get really quiet and so excited to hear about her personal life. But then she'd go on to say that it was Leonardo da Vinci, and she just was, inspired by his work, especially his manuscript drawings that would combine words and images. So at any rate, she went to Italy in 2006, went to several cities. Vinci was one of them, but here she's in Venice, and she depicts, people feeding the pigeons. She did this work in many different media as well. And then another theme that fascinated her was the Sellsville Circus. And the Sellsville Circus was one of the largest circuses at the turn of the last century. And they had their winter quarters here in Columbus. And what appealed to Amina was that it was a fairly integrated community. So Black kids went to school with white kids. In fact, they called the school the Polka Dot School. And that really fascinated her. So she loved depicting circus clowns and parades and the acrobats and the trapeze artists. And in fact, she had hoped to, she submitted an idea for to design the atrium of one of the major hospitals here. And she saw it as having all these circus elements. The plan was rejected, but we do have some of these wonderful drawings that she did for that, trying to win that commission. Oh, Deidre can tell you about the very last section of the exhibition.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And this was quite an exciting and inspirational and spiritual experience for me personally. And I hope for all the people that participated. Carol and I, and with the assistance of our videographer, Jeff Sims, that you see in the image to the right, lower right, had the pleasure of interviewing 30 people that knew Amina. And the criteria was, had they been in her home? So one of the questions out of the four was for them to tell us what the experience was entering into her home, because we wanted to elicit that response from them so that we could then share it with you. So again, throughout the exhibition, we're trying to give you a feeling of what it felt like to be amongst the artwork, the ephemera, the collections, the spirit and the life and the inspiration that was in the home studio. And I really do believe this is a wonderful tie for everything that we had done before to get to the end and to hear the speakers kind of tell their stories of what it was like to be with Amina. And again, these were recollections that they had, but there was such a synchronicity with what they said, which is kind of affirming that they're all talking about the same person, and they all sort of speak to the sacred nature of the space. But I really invite you to come and listen to these wonderful friends, family members, colleagues, associates, people from everywhere around the country and in the community of all walks of life who have the shared meaning and experience of being in Amina Robinson's presence and being in her home. We hope that really gives you the treat that we had actually when we entered the home. And I think what's going to be nice is for you to hear the upcoming poem that I think Scott Woods will actually share with you the experience also that he had experiencing Amina's work.
Yeah, I might just add that, as you can tell, Deidre and I could rag on and on about Amina and this exhibition. We're going to stop there, but we really do believe that you'll want to spend some time in the exhibition and maybe come back more than once, because there's a lot there. And we just hope many of you will get here, and that I'm also hoping, Nanette doesn't know this, but I hope we have a real opening like in the summer or the fall when we can all be together and celebrate the way we have in the past for our wonderful exhibitions.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for listening. And Nanette,
I want to thank you both. I learned things in this. This is an incredible evening to have this is an extraordinary exhibition to see 7 decades of Amina's work and to see that sort of the story of the journey she was on as an artist and as a woman is an incredible, an incredible gift that you've given us. And I thank you both. Before I hand over to Scott, who again, we are so excited that he accepted our invitation to write this piece. He is an extraordinarily talented person in our community who just keeps giving to our community. And I, again, the founder of the Streetlight Guild, winner of a GCAC award in 2017. Before I pass that to Scott, I want to say that I think many of us today are aware of the advisory that the city and county have issued. After a lot of thought, the museum is going to stay open, but we are going to close indoor dining in Chaco. We are going to reduce the amount of tickets that are available per hour and redouble all of our safety efforts. Our message to you is that we're a safe place if you need us. But I want you all to take this advisory to heart. We need to come together as a community and stop the spread of COVID. And the way to do that is to watch out for each other. So I want you to take care of yourselves and your families and our community. This show is open a long time. And this video, we're gonna post this, you're gonna be able to watch it again. You come when you feel safe. And if that is much later, that's okay. I want you all to be safe. So please know that. And now, Scott Woods.
Catch these hands for Amina. The beginning of one's life never begins with oneself. Amina Robinson. When writing a gospel, always note the place, then the activity. The place will not always stay. Sometimes they crown our emancipated spaces someplace else, but someone will always need a sock or a chicken foot. Keep track of these bones. One day, you may have to make flesh clay of them. Someday, someone will somehow, sometime, you're something. What you need a bed for anyway when you got all this world to sleep on? Kitchen is just a place to cook more art. Dining rooms make great studios. Bedrooms, profound museums. A hallway is a perfect place for another gallery. So claim your space now and loudly. Kitchen, bedroom, Poindexter, Beatty Center, the Cameo, the Pythian, Ted's Place, all of the schools. These places where we ruled and now hold on to with our teeth. Where we have been before and before. Her Uncle Alvin says as early as 1200, when Africans settled the Ohio Valley in ships made from stitches and stories, those ancient Africans who became the silt and dust of Poindexter Village, whose children would disappear into its obsidian streets, and upon whose flesh you could grow the grandest blackberries, which just goes to show that stories run in Amina's veins. Raggin on from Sapelo Island to now, a cart full of brown smiles turned to scowls as they passed, baptized by an orchard of ripe and hanging kin, always looking back, first over the shoulder, then with arms open wide to the past as if the trees might give up their ghost. And in her hands, they do. You can feel the cheeks of your cousins in the grain of every door. The masks of Thimba are not disguises, but our true selves hollering into the red sky. All these black people who smile but do not show their teeth, calling forth all the buttoned-down gods of man to come catch these hands. Let us make a quilt of the quilts, needle to thread life, a maestro of souls. Even if you out of work, you work. Hands are the first tools of a people, and all her hands were large enough to hold the world, at least this one. Called out each morning from a sidewalk-shaped grocery list, a street full of prayers, a block of hymns, and the mundane sold in ecstasy. Head kicked back and laugh, you can almost hear a dancer's gait frozen, held aloft on pedestals of auction block wood, family albums that look like gallows. Iceman, bread man, rag man, sock man, cameraman, vegetable man, chicken foot woman, come get your hustle on. It's a blues life, a jazz walk, a symphony of Mount Vernon lives, dotting the musical staves of songs sung in the leathery tongues of East Side angels. Oh, to need a rag so bad you buy one, a sock delivered to your door, ice so heavy the sun takes its sips and leaves. Learn to be one thing on this avenue and you'll live forever. To become what you carry is to become a patron saint of the bramble. Umbrella man is a golem of shades. Chickenfoot woman, a priestess of every good Saturday night supper for 7 blocks. Amina, made of brush and rag and button and hog-mog, carrying all of her people like a brownie-skinned man, a pantheon of black Jesuses. And I stand here in this archive of captured dreams, an Alexandrian library of long-gone mystics, looking at this button a goddess's eye looking back at me, strung firm into the face of an ancestor I did not know I had. Thimba whispering to me that a life is a walk that Ragginons, unfolding and unfolding through time, take a life to create and capture at once. The beginning of one's life never begins with oneself. So says the art woman, the button teacher. So says the hogmog chef and the empress of blackberries, the envelope steamer and the gopa goddess. So says the gardener of bottles and spirit catchers, the mayor of villages that sink into the concrete and come back blacker still as if their roots were oil and slave blood. So says the African time traveler and the eternal Ohioan, the trustworthy daughter thus named. So says the realtor of holy places and sensei of stitches, the librarian of sleepy-eyed languages and optometrist of cowrie shells, the archaeologist of memory over searching, the carrier of homes, the avatar of unrequited love letters that have had their bellies steamed open to make room for more love. So says the treasurer, the collector, the composer, the walker between worlds and the world filled with the walks of others. So says the teacher of this last lesson, who is somehow gone but present, still drawing on the walls, still penetrating all hallelujahs, midwifing the middle passage back into now, still catching every newborn old world in her great hands.
Wow. Wow.
On that, wow, I was like, wow, with you, Deidre and Carol. On that extraordinarily inspiring note, we will close our evening. Thank you again to all of you. This is mostly for our members tonight, people who support the museum year after year. We thank you. We love you. Thank you for caring and loving about the museum. And please take care of yourselves.